Reb Zalman.
Yes.
Thank you for having Reb this conversation. It is really a kavod for me and for all of us. In your book, From Aging to Saging, you write about a moment of transition when you were, I think, about 60 years old.
Yeah.
And you looked forward with a great deal of trepidation. And we are now sitting some number of years after that.
It's 23 and a half years after that, yes.
Kanhara.
Yes.
And I'm curious how things look at this vantage point.
Well, let me go back for a moment to the 60 point, because the issue will be more important to the people who pay attention to this than what comes afterwards. I'll be glad to talk about that. I wasn't in trepidation. I was unconscious. What was happening is I couldn't understand. You remember where I was when I was 60. I was, Baruch Hashem, lots of things were happening in Jewish renewal and so on and so forth. So why was I depressed? So going to do that retreat at Yesod Foundation for 40 days, I was able to get to the place that I was able to listen to my body. That's so important. I wish that the people who are teaching davening would say to people, when you are doing Birchot HaShachar in the morning, before you start talking to God, talk to your body. When you say Asher Yotza and you go to the place of Galui v'Yadua Livnei Kisei Kvodecha, ask, what do the legs want to say? You know what the guts want to say. When you hear that, you become wiser. Well, my body was telling me, you have no right to treat me as if I was 25 or 30, and that the reason for the depression was that I hadn't made the transition into elderhood. And that started a whole series of things. Years before, I'd read a book by Gerald F. Hurd, and I'll remember the title in a moment. It doesn't come to me.
The
Five Ages of Man. Right. And he was and I met him. He was a wonderful person. He also wrote another book, and I would want the students at RRC to get to read it. It's called The Gospel According to Gamaliel. He placed himself into the shoes of Rabban Gamliel, who's the teacher of Saul of Tarsus, and from that perspective describes the story of Jesus of Nazareth. And he not being Jewish, so to be able to have such a perspective was wonderful. At any rate, so having read this book, and he's talking about all these transitions as being new initiations, I'd read it was only in my head, and it was when I was at Lama that I began to pay attention to that. From that came the question about, if you look at what's the Shulchan Aruch say to people, most of the time it has people in mind who didn't have a great deal of longevity. So what is it that when you look in Pirkei Avot and you see Ben Shishim, Ben Shivim, Ben Shmonim, Ligvura, that's wonderful, you know, but it has another meaning too. You know?
I never thought till this moment that maybe that Gvura wasn't the kind of He-Man's strength Gvura, but rather the Gvura of limits.
That's
restraint.
right. That's right. And they start coming in the same sense also that you want to say something about if a person has vitality in Big Gvurot, you can say it this way too, but there's a narrowing there. So I had to start asking myself, what models do I have of people who owned their zikna, their elderhood? And I didn't have such models. I looked around, and even after he had the heart attack, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was still handing out dollar bills and doing all these things and talking sometimes for hours to his people. And I didn't see him telegraphing to us, I'm no longer able to do what I was able to do before. And I didn't see it anywhere else among our people. I did see it among the Pueblos, Native Americans. I did see it in other places. For instance, what does the word Shaykh mean? It means zaken, an old timer. Starets is a good word that the Russian Orthodox used to use, someone who is an elder in the same way. And I didn't find that clear. So I started to ask myself, what about the society? No model for it. And I realized that we had models for everything, preschool, and then school and so on and so forth. And when you are no longer productive and you retire, you're seen as redundant population. So the whole picture of where do we have to go with this, what has to be done, and what are the internal things you have to do in order to become an elder, not just be an alter, etc. Yeah.
So for you at that moment when you were 60 and you realized that your body was sending you a message, that it wasn't the same body that you had when you were working in 25.
Right.
But clearly your mind and your spirit were very fruitful and still ambitious. How did you reconcile this kind of nascent awareness with whatever aspirations you had on the other planes?
It came to me in the following formula: extended life expectancy, extended consciousness. You see, on the one hand, it's very clear that brain cells are dying off, and that I have now fewer than I had a while ago. On the other hand, what makes the difference, for instance, for the nuns who had Alzheimer plaque and nevertheless were sharp till their end, was that the number of dendrites and the connection of those cells that were still active, more and more connections were made, more associations were made. So the issue of having a mind gym, to do things to keep awake, alert, is one level. But that's only for the cortex. Most people, when they study Kabbalah and they hear about the four worlds, don't realize that those four worlds and four yogas and four levels of Sufism, all these forces that come along, have something to do with how we are hardwired. There is the reptilian system, there's the limbic system, there's the cortex, and there's beyond the cortex. Prefrontal lobes a little bit, and there's more and more and more of uncharted brain, if I want to say it this way. And that's where intuition resides. We have paid a lot of attention in this society to sensation and to thinking. To feeling and intuition, we haven't had the right words because it's right brain stuff. And that's where, in a sense, I want to say Hasidim and Misnagdim. Mm-hmm. Left brain Misnagdim, right brain Hasidim, and the sense of developing the contemplative skills that are necessary for successful aging and extending consciousness start coming in. What I'd learned in Chabad and other forms of meditation was that you can sit in a small place, but you can stretch your mind to the place of Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, way back to the Big Bang. And Ve'achri Kechlot HaKol Levado Yimoch Nor, all the way to the last black hole. Leit Na'asar B'chefzo Kol, from the Big Bang to the black hole, is where the Rebbeinu Shalom's present is. Azay Melech Shemonikra,
So getting maybe a glimpse of that.
Yeah, right? So, but to stretch the awareness, I'm not only saying the conceptual stuff, but the imaginal stuff into that direction is important. There is a shift that happens, and now we're coming closer to the thing you want to discuss. There's a shift that happens in what kind of davening is satisfying. And I find that while at one point, I don't know if you remember the days when we used to have services in the dark and a strobe light, and we were dancing to recorded Kabbalat Shabbat. Yeah? Those were the days on Emlyn Street, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful things. But I'm certainly not there anymore.
That's not floating your spiritual boat.
Right. On the other hand, the thing of looking at history, looking at the panorama of history, is an amazing thing. Another thing is, I don't have a good, how would I say, there hasn't been a good epistemology for describing what I'm about to tell you. But I can identify there's an empathic way of knowing something. And for me, when I think of Melech HaOlam, I don't think of omni, ultra, infinite, and so on and so forth. I had to schmooze with Houston Smith, and he goes to the infinite, and I said I can't make it beyond the spirit of Gaia, because the other timelines, size differences, I'm not at all I don't exist there. I don't exist on galactic time, I exist here as part of Gaia, as a living Earth being a living being. Well, once you get to that place, then the question is, who's the Ribbono Shel Olam?
Exactly. So who is this Melech HaOlam,
right?
that you're...
So I'm asking really, I want to, just the same way as you say about the planets. Tovi me'orot shebara Eloheinu yitzarim bedat, bevina u'behaskel. Most of the time we say that the simple translation is God used dat, bina, and haskel. But you can also read it that there is a dat and bina and haskel in Mars and in Venus and in Mercury. There is an amazing book by C.S. Lewis, The Descent of the Gods. And there's a chapter there that Hideous Strength is the title of the book. And there he has a chapter, The Descent of the Gods. And when Mercury comes in, it's a whole different mindset than when Mars shows up and Venus, And you get a sense of Earth also having something. And every time we talk about Shechina being in Golus, I'm going to have a schmooze with our Ohala people about the 3 weeks soon. And I want to talk about the Golus HaShechina in terms of Earth, the ache that Earth is feeling. If I identify with our Mother the Earth and I ask, Nu, how am I feeling? Is Ein Bo Mitom, Everything hurts. All over the planet, things hurt. Emphysema of Earth, blood poisoning of the rivers, and so on and so forth. The fever of global warming that's going on. So if you were to ask Mother Earth, how are you feeling? And she's of Tzoros. So that sense, here I can so really with my heart identify, and I don't have to go to theologians with highfalutin notions, That Shechina, Ribbono Shel Olam, of this Olam, I can be in touch with.
Do you think that some of the life experience of growing older and having felt your own body have its betrayals and have some losses and disappointments makes you more awake to that identification?
All that, because I couldn't possibly have empathy if I wouldn't have felt aches all over my body, Mm-hmm. Having gone through several operations. In eldering, we say that you have to come to terms with your mortality, and that's a nice way of saying it. But when I'm on the gurney and they're rolling me into the operating room, it's like coming to terms with dying. It has a different time,
Yeah. It's not so pretty.
Right, and that's what I've been saying to the people, that I'm now in my December time, and that gives me a great deal of nachas that we are doing this.
Yeah.
Because what is the greatest pain of dying is that this consciousness acquired over a lifetime is going to go with the brain rotting away, and no one will get it. So Heschel tells he's walking the street and somebody says to him, "Are you saved?" And if you take it in the sense of elder mind, am I saved? Yes, I'm saving. I'm uploading,
Yeah, so talk about that, because I know that you've really devoted this past chunk of your life to legacy work in one way or another. So what is, if you had to give us a tamtzit, just a taste of what's the message that you really hope will outlive you?
Well, let me first
Torah.
talk about the process. I'm always interested in the process of that, because not everything is worth leaving as a legacy. In '75, I was here in Boulder, and Trungpa started Naropa. It was a year after he started it, and my Papa Shalom passed on, and I drove a car after Shiva, and a black guy came on my right and cut me off to my left, and we barely avoided an accident. And I started to scream in Yiddish. And I really got but in Yiddish. And I pulled over and asked myself, where did this come from? And then I said, Papa, a lot of stuff that you left me I like to keep, but this one...
Let it go.
So I've been asking people, when it comes to Yerusha, I'm speaking about this mental, spiritual Yerusha, really to sift out what they don't want to inhabit.
So do you have any advice about that kind of winnowing of what's really the nuggets that are worth saving and what is worth letting go of?
You're asking the renewal question, because in our entire history, it's the same issue, right?
Right.
What is worth bringing into the next paradigm, and what is okay to leave behind? I'm sure that the pshat of so many things in Sefer Dvarim is something that we like to leave behind, right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't leave it behind, there's no difference between us and the Taliban. And Iran Idachat, go and Ben Sora Amora. We could go. What's a kafir? What's it called? An unbeliever. All that stuff. So we have to leave it behind. But the question is, and this is where Kaplan was so wonderful.
To revalue.
What was the central issue that they tried? What values were in there? And how can we handle these values? And are these still our values? And if they are, how do we reconstruct for ourselves a way to do it? Where I find that Reconstructionism is not quite reaching everything is because it has a low ceiling. Because there's an element that has to do with Nochach Pnei Hashem, praying, being the presence of God, having a sense of mitzvah as having ontic power and not merely psychological and not merely a sociological thing. So that's the criticism I have. But the process in which Reconstructionism does it is important. Now I go back from phylogeny to ontogeny, and I ask, how is it with the individual?
Right.
And it's the same situation. Because sometimes I have a conversation with the Zalman from before. Some of these conversations are the best held in the bathtub, sitting in the tub, and having a mirror, and talking to myself. So I was talking to the Zalman of the 60s. And not everything Zalman of the 60s did would get my hechsher today. Mm-hmm. But Zalman of the 60s said to me, don't you dare put me down. I don't want you to betray me. There's an element that my judgment of now would betray the person I was then. And I still can get into the skin of the person I was then. And he tells me, don't you put me down, don't diss me.
So on the one hand, not to betray the past and to have some empathy for the choices that you made and the mistakes that you made.
And to thank them, because that's how come I'm here now. Right. Yeah.
But there's some mode of discernment in you now that says, I'm not taking that, I'm not passing that on.
Some of it was located to a time and place, and there was a sea change in consciousness and morality in this country. AIDS has come in. If we go back to the days when one would say, love the one you're with, you can't be with the one you love. And then there's a whole shift that has taken place. And the Christian right, and the Jewish right has taken morality way to the right and not kept balance anymore. So it's true. So there's a different perspective that I have now. My sense is also that once you become an elder, and that's what I call the October years, so you have learned how to do life review, you have learned to do a cheshbon hanefesh, you have learned to go into difficult places of the past and see and find the gems that were there. No, that's important stuff.
The harvesting.
The harvesting of that, right? And then comes the November time when you pay back to the world, you know. Whether I like the policies of Jimmy Carter or not, but he and Roslyn have been very wonderful models of people who have used those elder years for peace and for the best view that they had to pay back to the planet and to teach Sunday school and to do all that stuff. So that's November. December is a whole other thing. And I would like it if you were to play for the students the track that I have on graceful passages. Because
this is a CD to help people who are dying.
Who are dying, right. And there, you know, most of the people on there speak to the dying. I felt if I'm dying, I don't want to hear someone else hack me a chinik. But so I did it in the first person, so a person can identify with it a little bit more that way. But that shows already the mood of the December year.
So since we're here, say a little bit more about that. What's different now than in those years a while back when you were anticipating growing older, and now you're here in December.
Right. I'm talking to you now. This is a very exciting thing for me. Valuable because of the uploading, and we'll talk more about the legacy and the thing. At the same time, I'm fully aware how my body is tired. I don't think that people who've talked about geriatrics, you know, have spoken from the place where there's a cellular tiredness.
So not tired today, but cumulatively.
Yeah, but also right now in my legs, you know, rest cramps. I mean, I could go the whole mindset. I call that doing the organ recital. Yeah. So that's not where I want to go with it. But I want to say this is real. It is real with the sense of we'll talk for another while, but my daily cycle of taking a nap is going to come and make its demands because the battery can't be charged for a whole day anymore with sleep. There is the time of about 4 or 5 in the morning when you wake up. After all, the bladder can't hold as much, and then you try and fall asleep again, and you can't, and all the machshavas start coming up at that point. And it's a time that you pray for people, you know, the people come up. And so one of the things of turning things over to the Rebbeinu Shalom is important. It's like Erev Shabbos when you say, these daigas, these worries I can't carry with me for Shabbos, so I leave them in the Shabbos box, and after Avdol I look at them again and let the Rebbeinu Shalom handle it in the meantime. Yeah. I think something of this sort is coming up for me now, that I can't worry about everything. Freud was talking about libido and thanatos.
Right.
And my sense is that thanatos is an instinct for closure. Just like there was in psychology, they used to talk about the Zeigarnik effect, you know, the sense for closure. I feel that people come up and say, we'd like to invite you to come here or to do this or to do that. And I don't have the motivational valences to it anymore. You know?
That's not what's pulling you.
Yeah, it doesn't reach out to that. Not for me. And whenever I can, I refer to the Talmidim because Baruch Hashem, you know. I'm very proud of them. I just want to say this too, you know, that really after the 60s, I began to pull back more and more and more. And I didn't want it to be like I'd seen among some gurus and leaders who sit in the driver's seat until they fall off. And then there are a lot of good people whom they have trained who go to seed because they don't give them a chance.
They didn't get to flex their muscles.
Right.
Well, they could still get some guidance.
That's right. So this was one of the kalot. There was a kala in Fort Collins. About 8 years ago, and I made it very clear that I'm pulling back. Last time at Ohala was my last talk that I gave officially. I'll come to the meetings, but I don't want to. I don't want people to call me if they don't have a mashpia, you know, with whom they consult these things. And I don't when the phone doesn't ring, I don't feel left out, you know. It feels like everything is doing the way unfolding as it should. And I'm going to show you later on, there's so much unfinished stuff that I would like to put into shape. Yesterday,
your teachings and writings?
Yeah, you know, because I'm a people person. So let's say I have a good idea, and I start writing on that, and it's accumulated, right? And then a phone rings, and by the time I'm off that, taking care of that issue, whatever it was, Lichtes Daten, you know? So
the work got a little abandoned by the way.
And
now that seems to be coming to the center more.
I have a whole shelf of these things, and that's what Thanatos means to me, you know?
Completing some of this work in a form that it can be passed on.
Otherwise, if you've seen what people leave over, if you've seen sometimes households of someone who has passed on, and there are those sales that you make, and so much of significance, not classified, not tagged in the right way, becomes garbage.
Right, something that was precious to the person. It could have been meaningful.
And that's good for other people, because you see, I just want to say this is apologia pro vita sua, you know. I could have spent a lot of time in the more higher, rare academic cycles and taking care of subtleties about Kabbalah and Chassidus and so on and so forth. But I'm so worried about Amcha, and mostly the beautiful American Poshet Yidden, the simple Jews. The guy can be a cosmologist in a university,
but Jewishly,
a simple Jew, and he can't daven in Hebrew, and so I created vernacular Siddur, vernacular Tehillim, for people. So it makes it easy for them to have access. I wrote this book. It's published under the word Jewish with Feeling. The title I wanted it to be was, "If you're so universal, why be Jewish?" Because that's a question that I get a lot from lots of people. You know, we see a whole wide world. Why get so narrow? And every time they go back to the Bible, what they run into is what they don't want. So, and on the other hand, we can't say that we want to leave the Tanakh behind and not use it right. So it's like, how do you introduce the Poshet Yidden who have had experiences with growth centers and meditation, some people with expanded consciousness with chemistry, and some people, whatever, have taken retreats and so on and so forth. So these are people who are not going to go in a simple way dealing with the Siddur and the Chumash.
Reb Zalman, I know that our time is finite, just like we're in the December of our conversation here. So I want to ask you, when we spoke one time, you talked about how you talk to God now at this time in your life, and how that's changed. And I wonder if you could just say something about that.
You know what? Terry Gross was recently interviewing the gay bishop from New Hampshire. And my heart melted the way in which that person talked. Beautiful and humble. At one point she asked him, how do you pray? And he said, I just sit there and let God love me. You know, for most people, that sounds like, what's that, you know? Am I yotze davening shachris for letting God love me for an hour? And the answer is, in my heart of hearts, the answer is yes. You know, I feel less verbal about that. There is a sense of, and at the same time, the petition stuff is very strong. I have a list when I do Refainu, you know, which, by the way, this is for all you guys in Reconstructionism to note. I don't say Rofei Chole Amo Yisrael, I say Rofei Chol Basar Umafli La'asot.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I can
so
also
really
pray for non-Jews in the same way.
Of course.
Yeah. For instance, on Shabbos, let me say this is important too. I don't have any more Yismach Moshe. Instead it goes, Ata natata belev enosh v'chevra ratzon lishbot yom echad b'shavua. V'chein katavta b'toratecha v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat. Afterwards, V'al yedei avadecha anevim katuv lemor, im tashiv m'shabbat raglecha, asot chafatzecha b'yom kodshi, v'karata l'shabbat onek l'kdosh Adonai mechubad, v'chibadeto ma'asot drachecha metzor chefzecha v'daber dabar, az titanek al Adonai, v'irkavtich al bamat haaretz, ki pi Adonai diber. Yehi ratzon milfanecha, שנזכה ליום שכולו שבת, ואז ינוחו כל יגיע כוח, וישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת, etc.
So you took our Shabbos and made it a prayer really in a much more universal way.
Yes, I don't want to say v'lo natata legoya ratzot, they don't have Shabbos, you know. It didn't make sense to me, right?
For your consciousness now.
Right. So then there's the petition prayer, and there are the changes that I've made in that. And Barech Aleinu, anybody who needs Parnassah is there, and institutions that are having financial problems are there in prayer. So I think, when I'm getting together with Mishpacha, or when Ohala is supposed to come, I have a whole geschäft that I put in Vekapzenu Yachad Ma'arbakan Fut Haaretz. You see, most people don't have that sense of talking about their own needs.
Right, so those prayers that are in these words that are passed down from our Dorei Dorot are really immediate for you.
Right, and they give you they're like a platform from which to jump into what's really going on. Another one that's for the camera again, for the people. I've asked last time I was pinch hitting for a colleague here in town. And I asked that the Aron Kodesh be open before L'chad Odi, when people usually say Ana B'choach, so that they can pray of all the worries they had from during the week and do their Thanksgiving. Shabbos morning, when it comes to Berich Shemei, V'tashlim Mishalim D'liboy V'liba D'cholamach Yisrael, I want the ark to stay open a little longer so people can, because they don't daven during the week and they don't have another opportunity to do that.
A lot collected up.
Yeah.
So, Reb Zalman, you mentioned before that you connect to the Melech HaOlam and you have a sense of God that's different now. And I wonder how, now that you see yourself in December of life, you connect to that image of God, which is called Atik Yomin, the Ancient One of Days. And whether that has meaning for you now that maybe wasn't accessible earlier.
It's not a quick answer, I've got to go inside for that. Give me a moment, it's okay. There is a meditation, a contemplation that sees ego big, a lifetime, all these years, and my connections and so on and so forth. And then there is a way in which that shrinks. It's not that it stops being, but it's given over. It's like saying, And this too was hashgacha, and it's not mine. And this too was hashgacha. And this is how Earth wanted it. This was how it's integrated in the Tzror HaChaim, and so on. And it gets to a place where that nekuda gets very small. And the place where that nekuda gets very small feels like I want to be a drop in that ocean. And that doesn't mean that consciousness will stop, because it's been going on and on and on and on and on and on. Okay? Moreover, that is compassionate. It's a compassionate consciousness. So it's almost like saying, Ani esbol, Ani amalet, you can relax. Everything that you have done, another way of saying it, I can say, Rabbi Shalom, every morning this happens in one form or another. You decided to be Zalman again, I'll give you a good ride, I'll try and do a noble ride for you today. Over this I have choice. But the other stuff is being created. I got this from the Slonim Rebbe in such a wonderful way. He wrote this sefer, Nesiva Shalom.
I'm studying that.
Isn't it wonderful? And he talks constantly about dveikut and da'at, dveikut and da'at. So I wanted to meet him. So I came to see him, and I asked him, Rebbe, I want from you a gmilas chesed. He looked at me, what gmilas chesed do you want? I said, I want you to say, Ata horei soladas, that pasuk, and hold my hand while you do that. Because of that attunement, see? I wanted to get to the place where he says da'at is necessary. What's his da'at? To get into his da'at mind when the sefer is wonderful, but I want to, it gets away from the idea to the realization. He turns to his gabbai and says, Ota Yid was versteht in meines Foren. Here is a Yid who understands what's in my books, takes my hand, holds it on his heart, and talks to me for 20 minutes. That was a transmission. That was wonderful. So, and here I met somebody who was at that point close to Atik Yomin. There's so many times when you have, if you do it without reincarnation, you have only one shot, and then you have to give din v'cheshbon. You have that old picture, you're going to appear there, oi, what did you do with your life, and so on and so forth. Akavya ben Mahalalel is standing on the side and schlepping me to the Bezdin Shalmala, With the Atik Yomin, I don't have that sense. I have a sense that everything that occurs is loved into being,
So when you talk about that drop
Yeah.
in the ocean, and the kind of attraction of that, is that
Yeah.
kind of an attraction to when this earthly life ends, that there's going to be goodness in that too?
Yeah, but I want to tell you something very simple. Being in the December time, I'm training myself before I fall asleep to do on the in-breath, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, and on the out-breath, Yah Echad. Because someday the time will come that'll be the last out-breath. And most of the time people don't think ahead of that.
Yeah.
And there is this wonderful sense that Kubler-Ross describes about one of her patients who said, Ich will mein Sterben erleben. I want to live through my dying, I don't want to be asleep at that time or out of it,
So you're practicing.
Yeah. And I think that is a very important kind of tshuva, It's not that something of my ego stuff will have to go to the laundry. It's okay, When I think of presentation of self, I think that's the big Avodah Zarah, How much energy people put into how I want to present myself. Look at what's going on with elections and so on and so forth, presentation of self all the time. That's, I think, the last Avodah Zarah left, And to be able to see that dissolve little by little.
So when you do this very conscious Shema Yisrael before you go to sleep, not knowing if it's the one before you wake up in the morning or the one before you don't wake up, all of that
that feels like, oh, so now I can turn in my wardrobe to, in the dressing room, that I'm curious to find out who I am between incarnations. I once did a trip like that with somebody who does this kind of work. I know I've been around before.
And you think you'll be around again?
Well, I tell you, I still want a big vacation in the big ocean before I come out again.
I hear there's a kind of something really relaxing about being a drop in the ocean.
Yeah. See, especially when you feel the tiredness of the goof, because it doesn't feel a tragedy to leave the goof behind.
It's really served you well.
Oh, let me tell you something else that's also important here. Better than some of the stuff that I'll tell later on, which I won't remember then. I was called to a shiva. A young woman had taken her life, and the family was very upset, and you can imagine. At the end of the shiva, I sit with the family and I ask all the other people to leave. And I explained to them about how the mirrors have to be covered, and that's not necessarily because of vanity, geschäften, but because the neshama is a roeh ve'eno nireh, and people who have had near-death experience have described that they're floating over the operating table. Nobody can see them. So if they would look into a mirror, they couldn't see themselves either, and that would be a great shock for them. So we cover the mirror. So why do we do it? Because we believe that the Bar Minan is, the soul of the Bar Minan is with us. This particular neshama would like to say something to you people, he said to the mishpacha. So I'll be the speaker for the dead. And I asked them for mechila, for the pain they had. And I forgave them also for not understanding me, for not being able to help me at that point, for not having the slightest idea what I was going through. So you can imagine that sitting there with the family, I didn't finish by leaving right away, It's a lot to work through. And at the end of Shloshim, I worked with the family again and worked through with them, so that this is an important thing about the forgiveness that has to happen to a neshama, so it should be able to go on. And you know where I learned it first? When my Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lubavitch, passed on. After the Tara, we were asked to walk around his bier and ask forgiveness and give forgiveness. Now, what does the Rebbe need forgiveness from us? But the subtle things, Even the fact that I have to be your mashpia and you have to be my mekabel for this. That this has been our goral for this. I want forgiveness. So I think this should be used even in every Avelu situation. So if you go and you make a shiva call or something like this, if you can work it out, that would be helpful.
I know that our time is coming toward an end. I wonder if you can say, of everything that you've experienced in the months up until December, what are you proudest of?
No, I can't say it this way. What do I value most? Okay. It's different because it's not that I'm not proud. I have certain things I'm happy, proud of my kids, and so on and so forth. When somebody says you're from Boulder, yes, 2 renewal shows, proud of that, when something like this happened. But if you ask me what's valuable, the few books that I did, and most of the time people spend one-on-one with people, because, and here that's also very important here for the people to learn. Things that are not the usual social things can't be acquired from books or through any other way except by attunement. Right now, you and I, if I could have our mirror neurons shown, here, it would show what kind of attunement there is going on right now. And whenever that happens, that creates a basis for people to tune into that again. And that's a body thing, and it's a place almost where biofeedback would work, And this is socio-feedback in a way, which then gives people a sense. So when we daven together or when we shmuz heart to heart, that creates a vibratory connection. And that's very important, because then people have that to be able to hold on. The other thing is also to show people what to do with their many theophanies. If you ask how many theophanies have you had in your life, if I had them all right now, at this moment, I would be super enlightened. So, but they evanesce, they go, disappear so fast. So how to fix them in mind and in body? Reb Nachman has something about teaching even the body from what your soul knows. Yeah.
Well, we could clearly talk for so many hours and months, but I want to really thank you for this conversation, which is just like opening a window into your experience in this December. And I pray for you that all of your days should be filled with goodness and bracha. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
And I want those people who think they graduate as a rabbi to know you're not just graduating. You're being transformed in that. You're being initiated. So don't be ashamed to use Avram Avinu's account, that you should give a lot of brochas to people, and I give you brochas that you should be people really roe kerem Yisrael in the best possible way. V'nomar.
Amen. Amen. Yeshkoyach.
Baruch to you.